Hey, this is Joe at Gray Bench Electronics. Welcome back to the pedal teardown series where I take apart new and interesting pedals and show you what's going on inside. Today we have the Behringer SF300 Super Fuzz. All right, we've got the Behringer Super Fuzz SF300. These have been very popular recently, and I think that's mostly because of the price. I bought this pedal for a whopping $15 on Sweetwater. I think it came to 20 something after shipping. It's a decent sounding fuzz pedal, and it's very versatile. It's got two different fuzz sounds. In Fuzz 1, I believe it's a more vintage, sort of mid-forward fuzz sound, a little more like Fuzz Face or Tone Bender-ish. Then in Fuzz 2, you have more of a scooped, big muff style fuzz. I might have those backwards. And then Boost is just lacking the clipping or the gain stages of those other two options. This is based on a different fuzz circuit. It's one of the Boss fuzz pedals that I can't remember. I'll put it in text. As far as externals, we have an all plastic enclosure. There's going to be cheap components here. There's no way you can sell a $15 pedal coming from overseas if it's not cheaply made, at least as far as external stuff. And enclosures are expensive. So plastic it is. Everything is plastic here with the exception of the base plate, which has sort of a rubberized coating on the outside here. The enclosure itself, though, is this obviously plastic, injection molded most likely. The treadle here is all plastic with a plastic sort of rubberized bumper, and it makes a sort of unsettling spring sound. Not particularly pleasant to listen to, and also not particularly pleasant to step on. It's sort of squishy, and it doesn't, when you step on it, the bottom corner here sort of collapses in. There's no wonder why there's a lot of projects taking the guts out of these pedals and putting them into aluminum Hammond style enclosures, because it would severely increase the durability and overall experience of using the pedal outside of the sound quality. As far as the knobs, we have push on knobs here going on D-shape shafts, and there's a lot of torque for these knobs, which isn't necessarily a bad thing. It's harder to accidentally bump it and lose a setting, but on the other hand, if your hands are sweaty or whatever while you're playing, you reach down, it may take a little bit of extra finesse to make changes when you want to. Mode switch feels mostly fine. 1/4-inch jacks on the sides of the pedal, PCB mounted because there's no external nut, PCB mounted DC jack as well. Use the standard 2.1mm barrel jack with a center negative, so that's pretty standard. Got our Behringer sticker here with different safety information. Serial, date code. Looks like we got 4 screws to get the back off. And if it's like similar pedals like Boss and Ibanez, we should be able to just push in these pieces and take off the treadle. So here's the inside of that. So there's our battery snap. And the spring just falls out, I suppose. So this sits over top of there. There's nothing really to retain the spring, as you can see. On Boss or Ibanez pedals, you'll see that the spring is sort of pushed onto a conical post that retains the spring. The spring is just sort of floating in there. And then you can see the switch that this little rubber piece actuates on inside. One nice little attention to detail that I can see is they actually cut the end of that piece of rubber at an angle, so when the treadle comes down at an angle, that meets up flush to the switch. So that's a little nice piece of attention to detail. And yeah, okay, so that's where the spring goes. But yeah, there's no retention for the spring. They could have potentially widened out that plastic a little bit just to actually physically hold the spring in there. And that's why the treadle will rock back and forth, because there's just this one point it's pushing on. So it would rock this way, except it's hitting the switch. And the other way, there's nothing to push down on, so that's why it'll sort of rock. And there's our treadle holder system. Just a couple plungers with a spring in between. Probably could get that out of there if you wanted to. That looks to be it for the exterior. Let's go ahead and crack open the pedal. All right, so here are some internal components of the Behringer Super Fuzz SF300. So normally we look straight at the board, but I wanted to point out some interesting things about the enclosure here. First of which is the back plate. So this is like an outer rubber piece attached to a metal backplate here. And the metal backplate's pretty hefty. And the reason for that is because if you didn't have a sizable, reasonably thick metal backplate on this pedal, it would be really light. And the fact of the matter is, when we pick up something light, it feels cheap. It feels crappy and low quality. And so Behringer, I can almost assure you, took that into consideration and made this backplate especially thick so that when you picked up the pedal, it had some heft. You also notice that there's a portion of the backplate here that is not painted, and that is to facilitate the connecting of grounding with this clip here. So what they have is this little metal clip that goes through two cutouts on this sort of intermediary cover here. And so this clip fits inside there, and it goes around this little post where we will screw in from the board. And on the PCB here, there is a pad that is connected to ground, and that comes through. The pad here touches this little metal clip, and this clip reaches through this orange piece here. Got my complementary colors mixed up. The clip here reaches through this plastic back cover and makes contact to the back panel here in order to provide at least some shielding for the bottom of the pedal. Unfortunately, the top of the pedal receives no shielding because plastic is not conductive. And so there's no EMI protection from the top of the pedal, but at least you do get some from the bottom of the pedal. If you have power supplies or whatever running under your pedal board or the stage, you'll at least maybe get some shielding from that. So it's better than nothing, but a full conductive enclosure would obviously be preferable, not just for durability, but also for shielding. They have used the back cover for shielding, and they use it with this sort of clip system with a screw going through the board that contacts that clip. So that's how that's being done. And that's something, if you're going to move this pedal to another enclosure, that's something you're going to have to take account for, is getting ground from this PCB to the enclosure. The 1/4-inch jacks are not metal, they're plastic, so you can't ground through that. DC jacks, same thing. And so you're going to have to figure out ground somehow from, you probably just take advantage of the screw and get a ground wire out to the enclosure somehow. So something to think about. As far as the PCB here, let's zoom in a bit. So we have board mounted pots, of course. These are, as far as I can see, no brand pots. And yeah, they do require a lot of torque to spin those, which, like I said, is not necessarily a bad thing. We have a whole bunch of topside electrolytics here. These are Sancon brand and Jamicon. Not familiar with those brands. Our switch here has a nice little piece of foam to cover up the inner switch workings, which will help keep dirt and dust out. Because it is open on the inside there. LED, sort of an orange LED, and it does have a plastic cover here to keep the LED straight and to keep the legs from shorting out to each other. It's a nice touch. And on the back here is our full circuit. Like I said earlier, this is a clone of a Boss pedal, and so the circuit here, there's nothing revolutionary in that regard. We have an IC here, which is most likely part of the bypassing circuit. Turn the LED on and off, switch the input and output through the circuit, or just bypass, or probably through a buffer. We have a whole bunch of surface mount components, including transistors and potentially like back-to-back diodes could be in that package as well. Here's the solder points for our 1/4-inch jacks. We looked at those before. These are not branded as far as I can see. Here's our battery snap connection to the board. Here's a little foot switch down here for the bypassing function. Pressing that on and off. It's a nice tactile switch. You can feel it with the treadle. It's just that spring is so not comfortable that you kind of miss out on it. Just feels kind of smushy. But yeah, no question, you could absolutely take this PCB and drop this into a aluminum enclosure. It might be a little awkward because you do have these 1/4-inch jacks that need to go through the walls of the enclosure, but they're soldered on. So you might have to desolder one or both to make that happen. You can also do what some companies do, which is instead of just drilling an open hole for the jack, you put sort of a U shape, and then the PCB can just slide in, and then there's just a gap underneath, which isn't that big a deal. I know, I think Electro-Harmonix does that. All right, so that is the inside of the Behringer Super Fuzz SF300. Let's go ahead and put the pedal back together. All right, that was a teardown of the Behringer SF300 Super Fuzz. If you liked the video, I'd appreciate you hitting the like button and subscribing, and hit the notification bell if you want to know when I make a new video. Also, if you have any questions or recommendations for a pedal you want to see on a future teardown episode, let me know in the comments. I'm Joe from Gray Bench Electronics. Thanks for watching.